been known to hang around the ranger stations. And of course, when I said about them being able to take down a buffalo, in fact, people often find it remarkable that a lizard will take on and kill an animal as big as a water buffalo. I mean, look at it. It is an immensely strong, powerful beast with bulky body and ferocious horns, and it could deliver a lethal kick. Of course, Komodo dragons don't try and overpower their victim like a pride of lions. Instead, all they have to do is they have to bite the animal, and then they release it and wait for it to die. It was only about 20 years ago, because Komodo dragons, like all members of the monitor lizard family, were believed to use bacteria to bring down their prey. But that has since been disproven, because it was thought until 20 years ago that there were only a couple of lizards in the world, like the Gila monster and the bearded dragons, that were truly venomous. But Dr. Brian McGregor-Fry, who is one of the world's leading experts on venom, actually discovered that Komodo dragons and monitor lizards have venom. That the Komodo dragon's venom is full of is a very unpleasant cocktail. I mean, it's a lot different to snake's venom, where, of course, the Komodo dragon's venom mainly affects the blood of its prey. Like as it bites its prey, it injects the venom into its victim, and the venom affects the blood pressure, like causes a decrease in blood pressure, and means that the wound can't heal, and it can bleed out heavily, and of course it can cause infection by bacteria in like water or something like that. And it may take several hours or days for the Komodo dragon's prey to die. But all the dragon has to do then is follow and wait. Because Komodo dragons don't just hunt water buffalo. In fact, they also hunt Timor deer, wild boar, and small lizards, and they will occasionally be cannibalistic. But like all members of the monitor lizard family, they are opportunists and scavengers. So they will take an easy meal where they can find it, and they also have a forked tongue like a snake, so they can pick up all kinds of sensors of taste and smell from the air and process them in their mouths like snakes. And of course, as you can see here, a Komodo dragon's mouth has about 60 teeth that are as sharp as a surgical scalpel, and they inject toxic venom from a venom gland around here in the head. And surprisingly, they also have a very strong bite force for a lizard, which is very unusual because, like all members of the monitor lizard family, these guys have very lightweight skulls, and so they do have a surprisingly strong bite. And of course, like crocodiles, Komodo dragons are unable to chew their food, so what they have to do is they have to grab a hold of it and just wrench their bodies from side to side and tear enormous chunks of meat out of a carcass, and they can eat a third of their body weight at a single sitting, and after that they can probably go for weeks without having to eat again. And of course, Komodo dragons are actually one of the very few animals on the planet that do see us as food. And of course, Komodo dragons have been known to target, hunt, and even kill humans, but a lot of the time that is desperately rare, but it is something you've always got to have in the back of your mind. I mean, I've never been to the Komodo National Park before, but a couple of friends of mine have been a fair few times, and of course, the first time they went, of course, you're given the latest state-of-the-art dragon defense kit. So, of course, Because it's a national park, you're obviously not allowed to carry guns or anything that will harm the dragons, but you do need to defend yourself, so you're given a stick with a Y shape on the top. I mean, what use is that against a giant 3-metre long venomous lizard? I honestly don't know, but it's the safest way to keep as much distance between you and the Komodo Dragon's teeth. Also, another rule of the Komodo National Park, and this actually only applies to the women, unfortunately, which is if it's your time of the month, you can't go near the Komodo dragons because as soon as they smell blood, they switch to predatory mode and they will do everything they can to hunt you down. But, as I mentioned, attacks on people are very rare, but you've always got to have that in the back of your mind. And this is their range, as you can see, they're found in Indonesia. But right here is the Komodo National Park, which is where they live. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you is probably one of the most frightening creatures on the planet. And it is the largest venomous snake, the King Cobra. King Cobra is the largest venomous snake on the planet. When I say the largest, I mean a fully grown male can grow to be over 6 to 7 metres in length, which is as long as a lorry. They can be as thick around as my wrist. They can actually rear up and look me right in the eye. They can hold a third of their body length off the ground. They have probably the best vision and sense of smell and taste of any snake. And they have fangs that are long, thin needles that point down like this in the upper jaw and are fixed so they can't move them like a viper. And they have venom that's strong enough to theoretically kill an elephant, and they could probably kill an adult human in as little as a minute and a half. But I mean, while this is a snake with incredible capabilities, if you ever do see a King Cobra in the wild, I mean, all it really wants to do is escape from danger. Its first instinct is to flee to get away. But if it feels like it can't get away, it will rear up, spread its ribs here into a hood, and to make itself seem larger and seem more threatening, and actually it will give a hiss that's really more like a roar from a snake, and that's usually enough to frighten the predator off. And King Cobra, it injects enormous amounts of venom. And the venom is very complex, but the main constituent part is what's called a neurotoxin. It's a toxin that affects the nervous system, the heart, the lungs, and the respiratory system. It basically can mess up the nervous system, like to stop the electrical signals from your brain and going straight to your muscles to move. It can cause your nervous system to completely shut down, and it can stop your breathing and paralyse you in probably less than a minute and a half. But I mean, the reason why the King Cobra needs to be so venomous is down to its prey. It doesn't hunt warm-blooded mammals. Instead, it only feeds on other snakes, even some of the most venomous found in Asia, like the saw-scaled viper, the Russell's viper, the common crate, and even other cobras. And it even has some sort of immunity to other snake bites. And it has, once it gets a hold of its prey, it holds on tight and has to inject enormous amounts of very toxic venom, even deep into the muscle. And that could kill its prey in little more than a minute and a half. And then it will swallow its prey whole, because all snakes do that because they are unable to chew their food. And of course, in many parts of Asia, people have done a practice called snake charming. It's basically where you raise a snake from when it hatches. You raise it zipped into adulthood, and you quite often use them work with venomous snakes or even constrictors like pythons. And of course, one thing that people do when they're charming cobras is they do some very distinctive movements, like with their hand or even with their knee, and that movement catches the cobra's eye, and they fixate on that. And quite often you will see a snake charmer actually stroke a cobra on the head, and that might look like total insanity, but the truth is a cobra's fangs are on the upper jaw, pointed down like this and fixed. They're not hinged like the fangs of a viper, so the snake can only strike coming downwards, so going down on top of its head like that is actually physically impossible for the snake to bite anyone. But even so, it does take some serious confidence and not something you do lightly. But unfortunately, not everyone in Asia shares the passion for snakes. Quite often, if someone sees a venomous snake, like a king cobra, quite often they'll just take a machete to them and kill them, which is actually a very stupid thing to do, because that's more than likely going to end up with you being bitten. And of course, here is the king cobra's range. Now, the next animal of Asia I'm going to show you is the largest of its kind. It is the Sri Lankan leopard. Now, the Sri Lankan leopard, as its name suggests, is found on the island of Sri Lanka, just off the south coast of India. These leopards are the largest of their kind, but I'll get to that in a minute. A fully grown male can be just over 2 meters long and be probably 2 times heavier than me, with canine teeth as long as my index finger. And of course, these like all members of the cat family except for lions, leopards are solitary, with the exceptions of mothers and their cubs. And of course, the leopards in Sri Lanka, they're the only big cat in Sri Lanka, and one of the main reasons they're so big is because while in most of Asia leopards are outcompeted by tigers, but Sri Lanka has no tigers, which makes these leopards the top predators. They're bigger, bolder, more brazen. They're Sri Lanka's top predator, and they feed on the ground. But also, because the Sri Lankan leopard, vast part of its diet is spotted deer, which are the most common species of deer in that part of the world. Of course, leopards are opportunists, and they will take anything. In fact, they've even been known to take peafowl and rabbits, but incredibly in Sri Lanka, leopards have actually been seen tackling and killing fully grown water buffalo, which is actually very incredible. And the best place to see the Sri Lankan leopard in the wild is Yala National Park. It's Sri Lanka's most famous national park and one of the most beautiful, but there's only about 30 to 35 leopards in the whole of the park, and this is still a leopard, so you're not always guaranteed to see one, because they're shy, they're elusive, and they're nocturnal, which means they're mostly active at night. But even so, you still might be able to see a Sri Lankan leopard, and of course how they hunt is very leopard-like. I mean, they don't indulge in all-out chase like a cheetah. Instead, they have to creep up to their prey to no more than 5 meters before they pounce, and then they deliver a bite to the throat or the back of the neck. And as I mentioned earlier, because there are no tigers in Sri Lanka, that makes these leopards the top predators, and they don't have to take their prey up into trees like other leopards. like other leopards. Here is their